Of all the different facets of human existence, dreams are perhaps the most scientifically impenetrable. The precise content of a dream is known only to the individual who experiences it, and even for the dreamer the content is either not recalled consciously at all, or is quickly forgotten as it fades back into the vast tapestry of the subconscious. Dream content cannot be recorded and played back. Dreams that are consciously remembered can only be communicated to others through vague description or perhaps drawings. Even more inaccessible are the meanings of dreams, assuming they have meaning. Some dreams can be taken as subconscious responses to external stimulus during sleep, such as a suffocation nightmare occurring as a result of the sleeper's face being pressed against their pillow, or other dreams might be brought on by particular anxieties associated to our daily experience, like dreaming about physically fighting someone we have quarrelled with in reality. And then there are the really outrageous dreams involving people, places and contexts that we have never actually been to and involving reality-bending storylines. Sometimes we wake up feeling like we really have been off in some exotic parallel dimension. And most of the physical laws that govern our waking reality can be broken in dreams. Even our very identities can fundamentally transform, and the behaviours we engage in during dreams can go to great extremes that we would barely consider going to in real life. Dreams throughout history and still today represent a great unknown dimension. Every adult human being has spent thousands of hours of their life in this mysterious dimension, and we can only take guesses at what purposes dreaming serves, if any. Humans have various ways of rationalising their dream experience. Some cultures interpret them as spiritual experiences, involving realms that are as real as our waking reality. Psychologists and physiologists rationalise dreams as either random chemical reaction in the brain, or as the brain's way of subconsciously organising each day's new memories into the larger complex of our historical world experience, or as a means by which suppressed thoughts and feelings spill over into consciousness, and all of those could be true. But for the most part, we modern Westerners with our decreased spiritual leanings pass off our dreams as basically being illusions that don't need to be thought about or discussed too deeply. The old saying, "it was just a dream," assumes that dreams are not important. Yet many people have talked of dreaming about a particular place or event years before it actually happens in waking reality, as if their dreams were crystal ball views into their own future. I've definitely had this dream déjà vu on many occasions, but have always passed it off as incidental, assuming that the many thousands of hours of dreams stored in my subconscious must inevitably overlap with my future waking experience by sheer force of coincidence. The idea that our dreams might have great significance and even influence over our waking reality leaves our whole perception of reality open to uncertainty. It casts doubt upon the so-called laws of the physical world that scientists have convinced us are so reliable, but perhaps the dismissal of dreams as insignificant is a comfort blanket assumption. Elm Street, probably more than any other fiction movie I've seen, capitalises on this great human mystery that we call dreams. Other movies like Inception or Dreamscape have tread similar waters, but their narratives have usually kept a mostly clear separation between which scenes are and aren't real. But Elm Street obliterates those distinctions and even includes a scientific expert scene in the hospital where the doctors basically admit that they haven't a clue about the nature of dreams.
What the hell are dreams anyway?
Mysteries, incredible body hocus pocus.
The truth is, we still don't know what they are or where they come from.
Enough illusionary separation between dreams and waking states is offered generally to communicate the plot, but the film's at its most psychologically powerful when dreams and waking state reality cannot be easily distinguished from each other. The opening scenes delve straight into this obscurity of context. We see Freddy constructing his razor-fingered glove, but we don't know who he is or where the location is. Later on we learn that Freddy is the ghost of a dead child killer, but even that information doesn't reveal whether this opening scene is set in reality, someone's dream, or in hell. For all we know, this might be the flesh and blood Freddy constructing his real physical weapon that he will use to kill dozens of children before he's burned to death. His fingers, though dirty, aren't yet burned. The black-bordered framing of this sequence has been used in some other movies, such as the opening of Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior, to represent historical events long gone, so it might mean the same here. The ambiguity continues with a cut to a teenage girl against an empty bright white backdrop, a blank canvas, an unreal setting. And this is the only shot in the film where this occurs. A cut to a wide view and the girl is entering a dark, wet, decaying concrete tunnel in which the white canvas backdrop serves as the only light source. Now this white backdrop is not featured in the script, but there are a few potential reasons for its incorporation in the production. It might just be a device for dramatic lighting, though that makes little sense. Why not use lights built into the corridor like in the various boiler room scenes later on? A second interpretation is that it might be used as a representation of pain. The shots of Freddy constructing his glove were dark, and we cut from his slicing of fabric, accompanied by an unidentified scream, to this bright white shot as the young girl reacts to the scream. Extremely bright light is often used to represent pain because bright light can be painful to the eyes. Ever hear the phrases blinding headache or white hot? Another interpretation is that the white backdrop represents the illusionary void of dreams, a blank canvas in which everything, including the environment, is created by our own imagination. And the last possible interpretation is that the white light represents inevitable death, the light at the end of the tunnel described by many who have come close to dying but return to tell the story. Note that Tina isn't running to the light even though it looks like an exit. However, there's an important difference with the usual spiritual connotation. Although the surroundings are pure white, the girl's face is lit diffusely. She is in darkness despite the light, and that's quite jarring. A difficult lighting effect to achieve, so it may well be that the actress was blue screened and a white backdrop added later. Only after we cut to the wide shot do we see the dark tunnel context. Now, a crucial psychological point of this opening is that we've not been given any reliable information about plot or characters. The lighting conveys unreality, and the title and poster of the movie lets the viewer know in advance that the movie will likely contain dream sequences. Plus, she has on a nightgown. So the dream sequence implications are clear. However, like many dreams, there isn't a reliable frame of reference to the waking world. Aside from a mysterious voice whispering the name Tina, we don't know who this girl is or where exactly she comes from. That's important because the amnesia regarding our waking lives is what sometimes makes nightmares feel so real. In this nightmare, reality for both Tina and the viewer is limited to vulnerable girl, hostile environment, pursued by mysterious predator. It's the only dream sequence in the film that cannot be rationalised according to the audience's ongoing accumulated understanding of the plot and characters. Only when Tina wakes up do we begin receiving that information. Beginning the film as a contextless dream was a very wise choice for establishing the sense of terror, but rather than work within the limitations of the audience being able to rationally dismiss later horror scenes as dreams, Craven immediately gets to work on blurring the line between nightmares and waking reality in other ways. The slashes in Tina's dress immediately established that the opening nightmare was not separate from her physical reality. The two dimensions overlap, so that the danger subliminally exists in the waking state too. We're then given regular reminders throughout the film that the supposedly imaginary nightmare content can and does manifest physically. Nancy dreams of her arm being burnt, and when she wakes, she has a burn on her arm. She dreams of Freddy slashing her pillow, and when she wakes up, she sees a single floating feather. That's obvious stuff, I know, but I'm starting with the obvious, and we'll get more into the subliminal as we go on. And something that was scripted but not shown in the film is that after Freddy stretches out of the wall above Nancy's bed, plaster dust falls on her and she sees slash marks in the paint on the ceiling. But even in the film, it's not clear whether what we're seeing is Nancy dreaming about Freddy coming out the wall or whether he actually is. And of course, Freddy materialising out of Tina's dream to kill her in her bedroom as an invisible force sets up an intense fear paradigm for the rest of the film. Freddy can move about invisibly in the real physical world outside of dreams. Another tactic Craven uses for dream versus waking state confusion is to film dream events as if they are actually happening in the place where the person is asleep. So for example, when Nancy is being pulled into an abyss below the bath, we cut back and forth between shots of her drowning and her mother trying to get into the room. Is Nancy really being pulled into an abyss, or are the shots cutting back and forth between her dream and reality? When she's running from Freddy and finds Glenn is asleep in her room, is she looking at the real Glenn, or her own imaginary dream version of him? The weird thing is that when he actually wakes up, he does so from the exact same position that she dreamed he was in. How can this be if she went to sleep first? Freddy's phone calls are another good example. Everything leading up to this suggests a waking state experience, yet Freddy is able to make a finger-scraping phone call followed by a tongue-licking call on a phone that isn't connected to the wall. These phone calls are not clearly bookended by shots of Nancy falling asleep or waking up, so it seems that Freddy is operating in the physical waking state world. The script, however, describes the phone call sequence as a microdream. Now, for those of you not familiar with some of the terminology associated with the scientific study of dreams, a microsleep is a moment in which an exhausted person who is awake drifts off into a semi-sleep for a few seconds. Ever had the experience of sitting upright and then suddenly drifting into a short dream in which you're falling from a high place and then you suddenly jump back awake? That's called a hypnopompic hallucination, and it can be considered a form of microsleep or microdream. Now, it's all very well rationalising the scene in this way in hindsight, but unlike the script, the film doesn't give an explanation of why Nancy is being tormented by Freddy while she's apparently awake, so it merely adds more fear and uncertainty. Microsleeps also become more frequent with later stages of sleep deprivation, so being that Nancy claims to have been awake for a week, she ought to be having plenty of them. And this study for the National Centre for Biotechnology Information reports that belief in esoteric thinking, as in greater reliance on formal superstitions and magical thinking processes, goes hand in hand with sleep deprivation. So Nancy's long period of no sleep should be sending her a bit crazy, whether Freddy is real or not. Another odd feature of dreams that is capitalised on in the film but not explained scientifically is sleep paralysis. In a piece of dialogue that seems to be intentionally placed to register only subconsciously for the audience, Tina describes that when she woke from the movie's first dream sequence, she felt like Freddy was still in the room.
When I woke up, it seemed like he was still in the room with me.
Sounds like a real boogeyman once Freddy's coming for you.
That sounds very much like sleep paralysis, in which a person consciously becomes aware of their actual bedroom surroundings, yet their body remains asleep and unresponsive to the mind's desire for it to move. In this state, the individual sometimes continues to dream, and the dream content combines with their awareness of the physical environment. Often this brings on a nightmare in which a dark figure is seen approaching the sleeper and then pins them down in the bed and begins smothering them, with the paralysed victim unable to fight back. Even when the person recovers control of their body and switches the light on, they still feel for a long time afterwards that the invader is still present as an invisible force in the room. I've experienced sleep paralysis on about 4 occasions in my life, and it was terrifying. One of them was so bad I had to leave the lights on for nearly an hour until the fear subsided. And even for those who haven't experienced sleep paralysis as an adult, it's not far off the fear of boogeyman figures in the dark experienced by pretty much all children. So when we see Freddy attacking people in their beds or appearing as a dark figure or invisible entity, the film is likely tapping into any sleep paralysis memories that might lurk in the minds of the audience. A common variation on sleep paralysis is the experience of being chased by a monster in a dream, but only being able to run slowly, as if our legs have become heavier. Elm Street taps into this in the opening dream sequence, where a treadmill was used to allow the actress to run fast without moving fast, and slow running is used when Nancy's feet sink into the stairs. In the script version, this was supposed to happen in a street chase, Nancy trying to run through mushy concrete as Freddy takes repeated claw swipes at her, each swipe missing by inches. A similar effect is also achieved through zoom perspectives of corridors. This long zoom shot has Tina walking but appearing not to move very far. And in the school we get a very similar effect as different levels of zoom appear to distort the length of the halls, making Nancy seem like she's walking but hardly moving. Sleepwalking is another oddity of sleep that plays psychologically well in the film. Tina's second dream sequence, for example, has her getting up and leaving the house. Now, unlike her first dream sequence, this dream is occurring in her home neighbourhood environment, and it's nighttime both in and out of her dream. So the impression given is that she actually has left her house to wander the streets, perhaps in some sort of sleepwalking state. Again, this blurs the lines so that the presence of Freddy feels more physically tangible, and this occurs with most of the film's dreams. The dreamer retains whatever clothing or pyjamas they were wearing when they fell asleep, and they usually stay in the same environment that they were in when they fell asleep. And this is important because with real dreams, the context is usually very different to the reality. You may dream about your own house, but the house will be slightly different, a slightly different layout, different decor, and so on. And your clothes will be different. So to make the context of the dreams in the movie pretty much identical to the context in which those characters actually live is very powerful. For Tina's second dream sequence, something which was scripted to add even more of a sleepwalking implication is that as Freddy chases her in the street, she screams for help and sees people peek out their windows and then close their curtains in fear and switch off their lights. In the same scene, she shouts for Nancy to help, but Freddy responds, "She's still awake, Nancy can't hear you." This implies that Freddy is constantly watching people both in their waking states and sleep states. It also suggests that if Nancy were asleep, she'd be in the same dream world as Tina, even though it's Tina's dream. Surely any manifestation of Nancy in Tina's dream would be imaginary and wouldn't require the real Nancy to be asleep as well. Although that script detail was left out of the film, the notion of dreams occurring in a parallel dimension that actually exists instead of being created by the dreamer is found in this scene. Nancy speaks of an unspecified plan. We then fade to black, which sneakily suggests a transition to sleep before Nancy leaves the house and wanders the streets. We don't know yet if it's a dream, but Nancy begins calling to Glenn, who is keeping watch from behind a tree. So, are the two of them actually in the street? Have they both entered the same parallel dream dimension? Is Glenn's presence a figment of her imagination? Or is Nancy talking to Glenn in her sleep while he answers from his armchair? Only at the end of the sequence do we find out Nancy was just asleep all along, and so was Glenn. In two scenes I noticed a subtle visual overlap with the opening dream sequence. Vulnerable Tina was lost in a cold, wet basement-like hallway lit at both ends. In her second dream sequence she encounters Freddy backlit in a cold, wet alleyway. The second recurrence is in the school hallways. Long, cold halls full of metal lockers, lit at the far ends with shiny, polished floors. We even see leaves being blown about and hear the wind blowing like we did during Tina's death. So a deliberate effort has been made to subconsciously make the viewer fear the supposedly normal environments. Even in this establishing shot of Nancy's house, which supposedly is an introduction to a waking state experience, we pan down from a view of tree branches and the sky. That's a really unusual establishing shot choice, and I think it's because skies tend to be associated with spiritual states and dreams. You see how clever all this is, how the film taps into several different physical and psychological aspects of dream experience, and how it blurs the lines between dreams and reality both for the characters and the audience on many levels. It's complex and potent stuff. The characters are trapped in a state of permanent fear, exacerbated by the knowledge that sleep, and hence death by Freddy, is unavoidable. Another scripted feature that is missing from the film, but would have been pretty damn effective if it were included, is that during Tina's death sequence we were supposed to see shots of her point of view, in which she can see Freddy dragging her around the walls and ceiling. And in those shots the ceiling was going to stretch off in a seemingly endless plane as she's dragged without really moving. It would have taken some impressive camera work and set design though, so maybe the budget didn't allow the shots to be done. But even with the scene as it is, the spinning in a void reverse gravity thing works very well for establishing that Freddy can turn the laws of science upside down. The scene was also supposed to end with Freddy's laughter echoing off into infinity, which I think would have been a good touch. By the way, that anti-gravity, flip your world upside down and drench it with blood aspect of Tina's death was also used for Glenn's murder scene. Freddy likes to reverse gravity and paint the room with the blood of his victims. To round off this section of the video, let's explore for a moment the dreams within dreams concept that is used to frame the entire movie in the final scene. In the script, the doctor in the hospital scene jokes to Nancy's mother. Ever hear the old Buddhist tale about the king who dreamed he was a beggar who dreamed he was king? Now that's a statement to confuse dreams with reality if ever there was one. Not only is the line spoken by a doctor, a person we normally would expect to dispel the spiritual for the scientifically rational, but his name is Dr. King. That's no accident. It was intended that the final scene of the film would have the daylight street full of fog, a classic visual indicator of a dream state, probably because fog is similar in appearance to clouds, But the filmmakers were unable to get their smoke machines to fog up the street long enough to film their shots. Ironically, a mysterious wind kept blowing the fog away. We can see the smoke better in the shots near the door though. Though the end scene comes off as a bit of a cop-out, the "ooh, it was all just a dream" cliché, this is for once a film where such an ending is quite appropriate. After all, the film from beginning to end has made a concerted effort to imply that there might not even be a real difference between our waking life and our dream life. Who knows, maybe they're right.